Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on the AgentXcel podcast. And today's show, I want to do another solo show. So very important topic that I think needs to be discussed and probably discussed more often. And that is on finances. So this show is going to be all about finances, budgets, and really getting on the same page with your spouse if you have someone else living in the house with you where you're trying to have a budget. But I thought this was going to be a super good topic for this week going into the new year. Finances is something that I've had to do in my life since I was probably about 11, 12 years old. My mom I was the kid who had the savings account really young, how to reconcile, how to flip actually over my bank statement and reconcile my bank statement when that came in the mail. So that was just kind of the way I was raised. And so finances has always been something that I've been into. And as I speak to a lot of realtors, I realize that this is it's a hard topic because people can be, so out of tune with their finances, almost to the point that they have no idea what's going on. And I've talked to a few people over the last few weeks and two specifically that I can think of that talk to me about this and how they're just going through a little bit of a struggle, and it's not like their business expenses, it's more of their personal expenses, and they can just get out of line so quickly. And so this podcast is just to go over like some framework to really wrap your head around this, because it can seem so simple in your brain, but when it comes to spending, it has to do with emotions. And anytime we talk about a budget, it's things sometimes have to be cut, or you've got to start making more money. Sometimes both those can be uncomfortable to do. So that's the topic of today's show. So why I think it's hard, why I think it's a hard subject, like, especially for like married couples, is because I think it's like when one person's getting on board with this, the other person might not be. So like I said, I've talked to several people lately, one being married, and they were talking about the conversation that it was actually challenging. And I started to think about that, and I'm like, do you know what that would be? I'm thankful my wife has always been super on board with how we run our finances. She's just always, if I say, hey, let's sit down and talk about something, she's always game for it and knows it's usually in our best interest. But, I was thinking about why it's such a challenge. And the reason is because let's act as if like this was fitness. Like, could you imagine if you decided like, hey, I want to start eating, healthy, and I want to start going to the gym every day, because your end result is, let's say you want to look better or you want to be healthier. So if you say I want to look better, like my physique, or I just want to go to the doctor and be healthier, you would say, hey, I want to look better, I want to be healthier. And then you'd start putting some action into play. You'd say, hey, I'm going to start working out and I'm going to start eating better. Imagine if you had to get your spouse on board or your partner on board to do that. So that's where I think this is challenging, because I'm like, yeah, that would be a challenge if you decided to eat a certain way or decided to do certain, exercises every day to get that goal. And you had to get, the people in your house, whether it be your spouse, your kids, all on the same page. That would be super challenging. And I think that's with finances. That's just it. You're getting collectively a household all on the same page. And that can be a challenge because we're used to certain habits, and we've got to make sure that these habits serve us and that they're going to get us to our end goal of what we want financially. So I'm going to break down some steps. Like I said, I wrote down some notes here on my phone, and it's kind of a framework of how I would teach anybody who's wanting to get their finances under control. So step one is, I would print off your bank statements, print off your checking account statements, and print off any credit card statements. That's first and foremost. Go to your bank website and print those statements off like the last 3 to 6 months. Just print them off, get everything in front of you, because that's going to give you a good account of what you're spending. And now I know you can just go on like the online app or online or on your app on your phone and kind of scroll through, but I really want you to focus on just printing this out, because we're going to do some more things with it. So step one is printing off your bank statements and your credit card statements. And then step two, I want you to go through, and this is where we have to decide what we have to have. What are those mandatories have to have? I'm talking like mortgage or rent. I'm talking, insurances, car payments, gas, just things food, things you have to have. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mark on those things that you want to have. And those are just things that you, I mean, would really like them. I mean, they're not necessary, but they definitely are high up there on you really, really want them. So close that it's almost a need. Like internet would probably be at that spot. Like it's not a mandatory. Like if you were broke, it would be something you wouldn't have to have, but it's definitely a luxury that makes life super, super convenient. But yeah, so just go through 6 months and just start writing down all the things that you're spending money on that you have to pay every month, no matter what. And then what are those things that you feel like you have to have? You maybe don't, but like, man, they're so close to being a need. And then you want to start looking through it and highlighting all the things that aren't necessary. And that could be eating out at restaurants. I know for some people that could be, a few $1,000s a month if they have a family. All that kind of stuff that you're doing, entertainment, eating out, highlight that because those things definitely aren't necessary. Now you might want to make enough money to enjoy that type of life, but not necessary. So that's step 2. So step 1, print off your bank statements and credit card statements. Step 2 is actually go through them, look through the must-haves. And then also what you want to do in step 2 is start writing down your debt. So what is your payment for like your car? What's your payment for your mortgage? Any credit card debt that you have, like what's the minimum payment that you have to pay? Because what you're trying to do now is you're trying to get an account for all the things you have to pay for in your life, and then also all the debts that you've signed up for that you have to pay the minimums on. You want to have all that in front of you so you can get a good account for what you need to make. Now, step 3 is how much income do you make? And so most people listening to this podcast are realtors, and they're going to look at it from like, Chris, I don't know what I make. Like I'm self-employed. I can make, anything I want. So the best thing to do is first, if you have someone in your household that brings in a salary or has like a set type of pay, first write that down. Like the person in your house that has a set salary, write that down so you know what it is. And then the best way you can do yours is not necessarily off your goals, but go off what you made last year. And that's how I would look and say, divide what you made last year after, take home after taxes and figure out what you're bringing in a month as the self-employed person. And we are in hopes that you have more coming into the house than you have going out off those have-to-haves needs and the debts. And like I said, that is the hope, is that you're positive and not negative. Remember, this a lot of times is a negative number for most people. And it's the reason why credit cards are so prevalent in our society, is because the lifestyle that most people are living, they need to have a credit card to fill that gap. And when I say fill the gap, I mean going from what you bring home and what you actually spend. You're spending more than actually you take home. And so you have to have a credit card to fill that gap. And then as that keeps going, that credit card keeps getting higher and higher. So until you really realize how to cut those expenses, it can get a little bit out of control. And I can see where a lot of people are in situations where they're just getting more and more in debt because they're not cutting their lifestyle. And so they're living off a credit card to fill that gap. I want you to think of the concept, like if everything was cash. And I was having this conversation recently with someone that I was helping set up their budget. And I was telling him, like, I explained it this way, like, imagine if you got paid, let's say you got paid $6,000 a month and you actually got that handed to you over in physical dollar bills, and you put that in your pocket. And you went around and when your mortgage was due, you went to like Quick Trip and got a money order for, let's say, $2,000 and sent that in. And then your electric was due, so you took, $300 out of your pocket, the actual cash, went to QT, got a money order, sent that in. And then when you went to the grocery store and the bill was $150, you just took $150 out of your pocket and you paid that. If everybody was just collecting their paycheck, putting those dollars in their pocket and then using those dollars, you would know at a certain point when you were out of money. And when you were out of money, you would decide, hey, I've got to stop spending money. And so the credit card got introduced, and it was hey, you can put this on a credit card. And as much as that sounds great, it can really get you into trouble. Now, I know there's some people out there like myself who put things on a credit card, and at the end of every single month, they pay it completely off, which I do. And I pay it off. I get those points and I use those for travel and air tickets and things like that. Now, there are some people out there that are they're using their credit card as a form of it being easy payments, but they pay it off at the end of every month. There's a lot of people who they're not paying off the full balance every single month. So that's getting them into trouble because they're just getting more and more into debt. But if we go back to that principle of if you just got a paycheck and put that money in your pocket, went around and paid all your necessities, you probably wouldn't run into a problem if you didn't have a credit card, because you would have to at a certain point start looking at your money in your pocket and saying, hey, like I only have this much left and there's still another 12 days left in the month and I have this much left, so I have to start being conservative with this money. So I really think that the introduction of credit cards is where everything started going squirrely with people and their finances. And so what we've got to do is we've got to establish some rules in our house on how, just because that's out there, just because the world has become attached to that, doesn't mean that you and your household have to. Now, you might be in debt right now and need to get out of debt, but the goal is let's figure out how to get you out of debt and then how to not use those anymore. And that's why I'm saying this can get challenging, because when you start writing down all the things that you're spending money on every single month, some of them feel like they're wants. Let's say like your cable bill. I know for some people that's like $200 and $300, and you got Netflix and you got Hulu and you got internet in the house, and you're going out to eat. Like all that stuff feels like it has to be done, but you start cutting some of those expenses. The gym. As much as that seems like it has to be paid for, it really doesn't. You could probably go work out for free. So it's just all that kind of stuff. Like if you're right now in a spot where you're putting money on your credit card and you're not being able to pay off the full amount, you have to really go through and start analyzing that first. Say like, hey, here's the wants, like, going out to eat and spending $100 here, buying those drinks here, like those are the first to go. But then you got to start diving deep if you're still in trouble and saying like, this feels like a want, and I know everybody else has this, but I might not be able to. So let's go to step 4. Step 4 now is get some type of budgeting app. And budgeting for people always sounds like a negative word. I like budgeting to be like a positive thing, because really what you're doing is you're telling your money that you've worked hard for on where it's going, that you control your money and your money doesn't control you. And so budgeting is something that I really, enjoy, because it makes me feel like I'm in a position of power. So you want to get some type of budgeting app. So what I use in my house is ynab.com. It's youneedabudget.com. That works well. Basically, you hook it up to your bank account, your credit card, and it knows when you get money into your account, it shows that you have money, and then you allocate it into your different like virtual wallets, we'd say. So like I have probably 40 things in there that I got to pay for on a monthly basis, like my mortgage, my HOA, my landscaper, my pool, Netflix, Hulu, my internet bill, groceries, car insurance, health insurance. And then it's all the mandatory things. And then it gets to a list of things that aren't mandatory, but I want, like the gym and manicures and pedicures and my massage. But basically it's going in there and it's writing out how I want my life to be. And it's saying like, hey, these are the things I have to have. These are the things I want to have. And then it's getting a list and knowing like, hey, does that cost you $5,000 a month, or does that cost you $12,000 a month? But you have to know, because if you don't have that much money coming in, then you basically have to start cutting that stuff. And your goal is to get to a spot, like I said, where this is a fun project, that you're looking at this in, like I said, a sense of like empowerment, where you feel like you're in control. But I know when I bring up the word budget, I actually just taught a class about 2 weeks ago, and the class is goal setting and taking massive action. And a lot of the class is on budgeting. And I could just see as I was teaching the class, like looking at everyone's eyes, and it was something that I don't know if that's what they wanted to hear that day, but I realized like the second I started talking about budgeting, it kind of just took out the air in the room, that it's not, I mean, I like to look at it as a positive thing, but I don't think everybody does. But I think that could be whether you're in a good spot financially. Now, don't get me wrong. There might be some people that are in really, really good spots financially that just still don't care about budgeting and they're fine. But I have to say that a lot of times, if you're not really liking the word budgeting, it's probably because it's more of the reason why you need to do it, because you're probably in a spot where you really you don't think you're going to like the results. Therefore, you don't even like to do it because you don't want to see everything that's going on. Like I said, that's a lot of personal opinions in that statement. So step 5 is set up a cadence with your spouse to review this. I have found in my household, what makes things so much simpler is if you just have a cadence with your spouse and letting them know, like, hey, this is the time that we chat about this. Now, what I've noticed with my wife is we have what's called a weekly CEO meeting. It's Tuesday at 3 p.m. So from 3 to 4 p.m., we have a weekly CEO meeting. And since we run our real estate company together, that's the time where we talk about the company and things we need to do. And we talk about our budget and what we need to do differently there. We talk about our money, any extra money that we have, what we're going to invest in. It's just a time where we've decided that like that's the hour. Now, don't get me wrong. We still talk about things throughout the week that need to be talked about, but like that's just where we design that time, because it's just like a good spot where I keep a note on my phone that says weekly CEO meeting. And there's times throughout the week where I'll want to talk to my wife about something, but I'll put it on that list and just say like, no, Tuesday at 3 p.m. when we have our meeting, we'll talk about it at that time. And it's so that I'm not talking about things all throughout the day or at evening time or on our date nights, that we have one place where we know that we're going to come together and we're going to talk about like certain topics. And the budget is what we talk about at that meeting. So step number 5 is set up a cadence with your spouse to review the budget. I think if you set up a time every single week where you say, hey, this is what we're going to do, you just go in there with a mutual respect that this is what we're going to talk about. There might be some challenging things we talk about, but we need to do it for our future. So let's go back through those steps. It was step 1 was print off your bank statements and credit card statements. Step 2, you got to decide what you're spending money on every single month that you must have, things that are like really high on the list that you don't need, but you really want. And then also your debt payments, what you have that you owe to debts that you need to pay on a monthly basis. And then write down, the things that you want that are luxuries, but you really want them. So you can see how much you need to spend or how much you are spending a month. Step 3, how much income do you make? Find the person in the house that's not that has a salary job, take their number first, find out what you make. And then that's where we're hoping the number is positive. We're hoping we make more money coming through our house than we actually have going out. That might not be the case for most. Step 4 is get some type of budgeting app set up. I recommended You Need a Budget, ynab.com. And then step 5, set up a cadence with your spouse to review this. Now, like I said, the goal is to try to make this fun. And how I've made this fun, or how I've decided to do this in my household, is talking about assets. And so my wife and I, we don't have any consumer debt. So we don't have any car payments, and we don't, our credit card gets paid off every single month. So I'm fortunate there. But so basically we just have our mortgages on our property and our rental property. And so when we're meeting up, our goal when we talk about budgeting is just, where is our extra money going? Because I want to make sure we're buying investment properties. I want to make sure we're investing in assets so that we can get to a spot where we're making more money or enough money coming through our door every single month passively, so that we don't have to go to work anymore if we don't want to. So I think if you were in debt, like let's say you have a car that you're in debt, or college that you're in debt, or let's say credit card debt, I think what you want to do is you want to try to make this fun by saying like, hey, this is the one we're paying off. So like, let's buckle down. Like, let's get in a spot where we have more coming in every month than we spend. And this is where we're going to actually, like, this is what we're going to do with this extra money. We're going to pay down this debt. And so if you have debt, the goal is paying it off. And if you don't have debt, then your goal is like, what assets are we going to invest in so that we can make passive income? So the bonus section of this, because that's really it, like the handling your finances, financing 101, the class is super simple, and you could read 1,000 books on this topic and look on YouTube. And really it's just a 15 or 20-minute class. And what I just did right here is actually what you need to do to get your situation in order at home with your finances. It's just the homework now after takes a lot longer. Like it could take hours, if not several days, to really set up like a really good budget, find out what you're spending, what you're making. But like the overall framework of what you've got to do is simple. Now your homework and you actually doing the actions can take a little bit of time. But I challenge you that once you get done with this podcast, that you just really set some time aside. And that's how you realize how I answer a lot of things in life for myself is you just got to block off the time to do it. Now, we could always say, hey, I want to get a budget together. I want to get a budget. I want to get a budget. But really what you need to do is first just say like, hey, I'm going to take 2 hours this Saturday and I'm going to block it off that says budget. And really that 2 hours is where you just get as far as you can in that 2 hours. Start printing off your bank statements, your checking account, start printing off your credit card statements, and then just sit there for 2 hours. And when you get done with that time, if you can't continue, the goal is to get as far as you can in that allotted time. And then before you leave, you set up another time and say, hey, in 3 or 4 more days, I'm setting up this hour or two and I'm continuing it on. Like the goal is to progress this so that you're not in the same spot in a year. And if it just was like, hey, every 3 or 4 days, I'm going to sit down for an hour or two and do this, and you just keep inching it along, and you actually never stop that, because once you inch it along and you finally get a full budget together and you get this all figured out, then that can roll into like every week. That could be your meeting with your spouse where you guys talk about finances. And like I said, the really cool part about this is what you focus on expands. So as much as somebody might be like, hey, I'm in debt and I don't want to talk about this weekly with my spouse, it's almost more of the reason why you need to do it, because like there's no way out of this if you don't talk, get on a plan, have massive action, and start tackling it and getting it done. So like I wouldn't look at it as a negative thing. I would say like, hey, we're talking about this once a week. We're going to get a reality check, find out where we're at, how far did we progress, and it's going to be really rewarding. But just getting that time blocked off on your calendar where you start focusing on it is the most important thing. And the bonus of this, and something that I'll talk about in a later date in more detail, but is tracking your net worth. So if you're in a spot, maybe like myself or others, that you really don't have any consumer debt, then really what you're doing at that point is you want to focus on more of like your net worth. You want to take, what are the assets that you own and what are they worth, and what are the liabilities? What do you owe on those, and how much is your net worth? And start tracking that on a weekly or a monthly basis. I know for myself, every single month I track my net worth. And so like that could be, your cash on hand that you have, your 401k, your stocks, if you own a business, revenue share, any rental properties you own. But that starts to be rewarding when you start looking at your net worth. And so like for me, that's what I like to do on a monthly basis, is track that. So but when you're in debt though, the biggest thing you should be focusing on is like, how do you get out of that? So let's just go through this one more time and then I'm going to wrap it up. I know today was a short show, but it's such an important topic, guys. So it's step 1, print off bank statements and credit card statements. Step 2, figure out what you must have, what your debt payments are, and what you like to spend your money on every single month so you can get a total. Step 3, find out how much your household makes. And then step 4, get some type of budgeting app. Step 5, set up a cadence with your spouse to review this on a weekly basis. That's my show for today, guys. Like I said, it can be a tough topic and I get it, but my goal is for you to be empowered by this. And I want you, if anybody has any questions on how to budget or any questions at all like that on money, please reach out to me on my social, email. Happy to help out anybody who's in a situation where they just have some questions and need some help. But that was today's show, guy, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will talk again next week.